Good evening and welcome to For the Record. Tonight is our first show for 2016. Over the last few weeks we've been doing a look back on 2015 over the festive period. We hope you had a enjoyable festive period and you get to enjoy tonight's show. Our guest tonight is the Ambassador of the European Union to Fiji and the Pacific, Ambassador Andrew Jacobs. We're going to be speaking to him about 2015, the year of development for the EU, and we'll also look forward to what we can expect over the next 12 months. Ambassador Jacobs, thank you very much for being with us tonight. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and Happy New Year.
Same to you. Thank you. We're going to look back on 2015 in a bit, but it's the start of a new year. 2016 is here. Obviously, the EU has programs lined up for the next 12 months or so for Fiji and the Pacific. But if you were to pick on a few priority areas for this year, what would you say is the major focus?
Well, I think talking about the Pacific as a whole, climate change is going to be one of our big priorities. I think we were very pleased with the agreement reached in Paris at COP21. You know, it's a solid agreement which really commits everybody in the world, all of the partner countries, all of the signatories, to making sure that emissions are reduced so that we stay below 2% increase. 2 degrees increase over pre-industrial levels. I think certainly the agreement in Paris and the strength of the agreement was due to very good cooperation, particularly between the European Union and the Pacific Island countries. And we were very pleased at the way in which the Fijian Prime Minister, but also other leaders from the Pacific, really did voice their views extremely competently and extremely well in Paris, and I think that was instrumental in making sure that we got the agreement that we wanted. And our Climate Action Commissioner, Mr. Arias Cañete, worked very well with the Pacific Island countries in the framework of what we called the High Ambition Coalition to make sure that the agreement was the one that we needed. I know that some people have said the agreement could have been even stronger, even more binding on the different parties, but I think it's the best agreement we could have got, and we're very pleased with it. So in 2016, I think it's going to be a year of implementation. It's going to be a year when we work very closely with the Pacific Island countries and Fiji on seeking to help communities to adapt to the negative effects of climate change, to mitigate against those negative effects. And we have some very concrete and specific activities that we have that we'll be implementing in Fiji, through a program that we're implementing with the support of the German development agency, GIZ. We're helping 2 communities in Fiji. One of them is in Kandavu, that's Narikoso village. Another one is in the Lao group on Lakeba Island. That's Wathi Wathi district. So these are 2 communities which are really endangered by climate change. So we're working with the government in order to enable these communities to move to a place in which they can continue to thrive. So I think that's one of the things that we will be doing this year, something very specific. But it is going to be a big year for climate change, but it's also going to be a big year for us in terms of starting a range of new development cooperation programs for Fiji and for the rest of the Pacific too.
Well, we've brought up the issue of climate change. Of course, it has been a priority area for a number of years now, and from what you're saying, it's still number 1 on the list. It's something that we have to keep working on in the years to come, possibly decades, if we are to actually see some positive change. I want to take you back to what you mentioned about COP21.
Yes.
Everybody, all the partners, we're talking about small island developing states, ACP countries, the EU, everybody was going into Paris with the commitment that they will come out with a binding agreement. We didn't get the binding agreement. According to stakeholders, what did come out of Paris is still acceptable, but we fell short of the binding agreement. Does that give you some doubts about the commitment of some of these carbon-emitting countries?
I don't think it cast doubts on the commitment of those who were committed in Paris to really going ahead and achieving the results that we need. I think there were a number of reasons why some aspects of the agreement could not be legally binding, and they relate to internal politics in some of the partner countries. But I think something very important in the COP21 agreement is the commitment to meet and review every 5 years the progress that all of the partners are making in relation to its implementation. That gives us the opportunity to really upgrade the ambitions. It gives us the opportunity to make sure that everybody is playing their part. Everybody is actually taking the action that they said they would. So even if we don't have a fully legally binding agreement, I think there is certainly a very, very strong mechanism for keeping a close eye on what everybody is doing in terms of reducing emissions. And that's something that the European Union was extremely committed to seeing in the agreement, and we were pleased that we got it, this 5-year review clause, and I think that will be a guarantee that the agreement does really have the positive effects that it's intended to.
Has politics and the internal economic and social issues of some of these countries been a factor that's hindering the help that Pacific Island countries and small island states need?
No, I don't think so. I think it was just purely a question of whether or not certain aspects of the agreement could be considered to be legally binding. When it comes to providing support to those most vulnerable countries, to the countries in the Pacific, particularly the Pacific small island developing states, I think that all development partners are extremely committed, and there was a commitment made in Paris to provide €1 billion $1 billion a year in support for mitigation, adaptation, and in relation to other needs because of the negative effects of climate change. So I think certainly the support that the Pacific has been getting and the support that the Pacific will get are extremely important, and will continue.
Just very quickly before we go to a break, what are some of the immediate effects we can see from the Paris Agreement?
Well,
Something tangible maybe in the next few months or by the end of the year.
Well, I think we're all moving forward on identifying how we can best use the funds that we have for climate change, and I think that really means empowering the communities. That really means making sure that the communities that are most affected by climate change can deal with its negative consequences. And I think that's really what it's all about, making sure that the people who are affected can themselves deal with climate change, and that is one of our priorities certainly for this year.
Okay, and with that we will take a short break. We'll be right back. Good evening and welcome back to the show. Our guest tonight, the European Union Ambassador to Fiji and the Pacific, Ambassador Andrew Jacobs. Ambassador Jacobs, I'd like to just pick on something you mentioned earlier as well with regards to development agreements, specifically for Fiji. What can we expect later this year?
Well, this is going to be a big year for our cooperation with Fiji. Last year, in 2015, we signed an agreement when our development commissioner, Mr. Mimitha, was here. He signed an agreement with Prime Minister Bainimarama for a new program which takes us up to 2020. And that program is focusing on sugar and agriculture and access to justice. When it comes to sugar and agriculture, one of the things that we're seeking to do, working very closely with the government, with the FSC and with all of the stakeholders, is to try to help increase the competitivity of Fijian sugar. We recognize, as everybody does, that come October 2017, because of a World Trade Organization ruling, the European Union is no longer going to be able to provide say preferential treatment for Fijian sugar in the European market. It's going to become a more competitive marketplace, so in order to be successful, to continue to be successful in the European market, Fijian sugar manufacturers are going to have to be more competitive. They're going to have to be able to compete on price. So that's one of the big priorities in terms of our support in the sugar sector. And we're working very closely at the moment on preparing the program, on establishing exactly what the objectives should be, and I'm very pleased with the results so far. With regard to the other area that we're going to be working in, access to justice, again something which is very important and I think corresponds extremely well to some of the priorities of the Fijian government. The program is designed to help increase access to justice for everybody in Fiji. And it intends to help to demystify the judicial process, to make sure people know how they can have recourse to the judicial system if they need it. And it's also designed to improve, let's say, the effectiveness of the way in which the legal system works. And again, we're working very closely with the Ministry of Justice and all those involved in order to get this program off the ground. But I think it will have an extremely positive effect. But one thing that I do want to emphasize is that the support that the European Union is bringing in is fully aligned to the government priorities. We're not coming and, let's say, inventing policies. Whatever we do, whether it's in sugar, agriculture, whether it's in justice, really is focused on what the government is seeking to achieve, because that means that we can be effective, our support can be sustainable.
One of the reasons, if I recall correctly, that Fiji sugar received preferential treatment was because we're a small market on the global scale, and the EU recognized that there was a need to support this very vital industry. Has it come to a stage where everybody's equal according to market forces, and how do we make Fiji sugar more competitive, given that we are still a small market?
Yeah, well, as I say, we are having to stop the preferential market access that we had provided, because the World Trade Organization seeks to ensure that there is a level playing field for everybody, and so they have ruled that we can no longer provide this type of advantage to certain producers, no matter what their economic status. But having said that, we did sign last year a new economic partnership agreement entered into force between the European Union and Fiji, which provides for continued quota-free and tariff-free access to Fijian products to the European market, including, of course, sugar. So there is a certain advantage there. But with regard to improving competitiveness, I think some of the things that we need to work on, and I know the sugar industry is already working on, is making sure that harvesting techniques are as modern as they can be, making sure that transportation is smooth. We can see if we visit the sugar mills during the crushing season, there are huge numbers of trucks arriving at the same time. There's a lot, I think, that can be done in order to improve the smoothness of processes, and by doing so to reduce costs, to make Fijian sugar, let's say, cheaper to produce, so that when it's sold on the market, when it's in the supermarkets in Europe, it's going to be competing well on price.
Are we talking about technical experts coming over to work with the FSC, or is it just purely financial assistance?
Well, what we're very keen to do this time with our new program for sugar and agriculture is to provide direct financing. In other words, not to come in with foreign expertise, with equipment and so on, but rather to provide the funds directly to the Fijian authorities to use as they see fit. But in order for us to be able to do that, we need to establish an agreement with the Fijian government which sets down, let's say, the reform agenda, what the Fijian government and we agree needs to be achieved in the sugar and agriculture sector. And when there are certain objectives which are obtained, then we disperse funds. So it's called budget support. It's a very direct assistance, and it means that the relationship between, let's say, the donor and the recipient changes. It becomes much more a policy dialogue. It becomes much more a dialogue of equals sitting around the table talking about what needs to be done in order to make sugar and agriculture more effective, rather than us sitting in an office making sure that tendering procedures have been respected, or checking invoices and so on. I think it's a very effective way of working.
And improving access to justice, of course, given the independence of the judiciary and the role of the judiciary, there are certain sensitivities that need to be adhered to. Is the EU going to channel all of its assistance through the Ministry of Justice, and how do you keep that buffer between the judiciary itself and the work that needs to be done?
Well, I think when it comes to access to justice, I mean, we're still working on the program, but there will be the provision of equipment, there will be the provision of technical expertise, and we also, will work with civil society organisations who will have the responsibility of making sure that members of the public know what options they have when they need recourse to justice. So it's really sort of upgrading the way in which people can have access to the judicial system if they need it.
All right, and that brings us to the end of another segment. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly. Well, Vinaka, welcome back to the show. We will continue discussions with the European Union Ambassador to Fiji and the Pacific, Ambassador Andrew Jacobs. Ambassador, apart from development programs with Fiji, of course, the EU office for this region is based out of Fiji, but there are a number of agreements also coming up with other parts of the Pacific. Are they similar to what you're working with in Fiji?
Well, we have bilateral cooperation agreements with all of the countries of the Pacific, where we're targeting things like renewable energy, water and sanitation, and so on. But I think very importantly, we also have a very comprehensive regional program, which is designed to benefit all of the countries together. And we're just working at the moment with the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, but with the SPC, with SPREP, with the other crop agencies, with the United Nations and a range of different partners on preparing a very comprehensive regional program which will go from here until 2020. We have a budget of 166 million euros, which is something like 400 million Fijian dollars. And we will, through that program, support in particular economic integration in the Pacific. There is huge potential for Pacific countries to work more effectively together in order to maximize opportunities for trade, in order to maximize opportunities for the private sector to work across different Pacific countries. And we're going to be working a lot in that area, helping to establish regulatory frameworks in different Pacific countries, which makes it easier to do business, because we do recognize, and I know our Pacific partners recognize as well, that there is a great deal of potential which at the moment is not being taken up. So one of the focuses of our regional program will be regional economic integration. And then secondly, we're going to be working on the sustainable management of natural resources and climate change. So again, more funds coming in for climate change on a regional level. And also in relation to that, we will have quite a lot of money available for fisheries, for the upgrading of fisheries conservation, but also for the maximization of the benefits that fisheries can bring to the Pacific. Again, there's quite a lot of potential which perhaps could be better tapped into. And then thirdly, we're going to be working in the area of governance and human rights. You know, we recognize that across the Pacific there is a desire to, let's say, do more work in areas such as violence against women, in areas relating to human rights, governance, public financial management, in making sure that there are transparent policies in place in which people really can ensure that all of their human rights are respected. So again, that's going to be the third priority area. So we're very much looking forward to this very intense program of cooperation, with the Pacific as a whole. I think the way in which the European Union and the Pacific countries worked so effectively together in the run-up to COP21 in Paris and during the meeting itself goes to show that we do have a very strong partnership, and we will be certainly strengthening our partnership with the Pacific even further during 2016.
Pacific trade has always been on the horizon. There are existing agreements regionally and bilaterally for free trade and tariff-free entry of products in a number of countries, but it hasn't exactly taken off. It hasn't been the success that it should have been, or governments had imagined that it would be. Are you talking about sort of going back and looking at where things may have gone wrong and where we need to pick up the ball again? Because I know there have been agreements in the past, possibly just ended up on paper and didn't come to fruition.
Well, I think we do need to look at, let's say, the obstacles for more free trade, and the obstacles and the non-tariff barriers which perhaps prevent or make it difficult for companies to trade across borders in the Pacific. I know it's not easy. There are different regulatory environments, and one thing that the European Union has done very successfully has been to break down any barriers within the European Union itself. You know, we have 28 countries, 28 member states, we have 500 million people, and we have one market. So the regulations for trading are the same across the European Union, and there is totally free movement of goods across the European Union. It will take some time for the Pacific to get to a similar point, but I think there are lessons that have been learnt in the European Union that we're very happy to share with the Pacific in order to, first of all, let's say, identify the obstacles, and then to, let's say, work to overcome them. So that particularly the private sector operators in the Pacific do have, let's say, more economic opportunities within the Pacific itself for exporting their goods and for doing business with each other. Yeah.
Apart from business within the Pacific, are there any programs for regional trade between the EU and the Pacific?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we have been working on for the last few years is helping entrepreneurs in the Pacific to start export businesses, to start to look at markets outside the Pacific for their products. We've had a program implemented by the SPC, which is called IACT, integrating commodity trade. And there we've been working in Fiji, for example, with a company which is exporting crabs. We've been working with another company which has been exporting ginger. And I think by exposing these companies to the opportunities outside the Pacific and to helping them to cope with the challenges of new markets, we can really do a great deal to benefit the economy of Fiji and the rest of the Pacific, but also to benefit the economic status of those who are looking for job opportunities.
How does a Fijian company access this assistance that you just spoke about? Do they go to the Secretariat of the Pacific Community, or do they come to your office directly?
Well, the Secretary of the Pacific Community is responsible for implementing the program, and that program is coming to an end soon. But as I say, we're starting to embark on a new regional program, so there will be similar products, similar projects available, and we will certainly go out there and make companies aware of what opportunities do exist.
And what is the EU interested in from the Pacific, trade-wise?
Well, I think there are a lot of sugar as far as Fiji is concerned, but I think there are a lot of niche markets. I think the Pacific as a brand is potentially a very powerful one. I think things like virgin coconut oil, handicrafts, products which can be identified with the Pacific. The Pacific has this image in Europe of let's say a holiday paradise. I know it's not all like that, but that is the image is swaying palm trees. The image is clean, natural environment, healthy products, and I think there is a lot of opportunity for private sector companies to really build on this. It's a question of marketing. Marketing is not easy. To get into a foreign market is certainly a big challenge. But what we would like to do in the future, to build on some of the support that we've already provided, is to help companies appreciate what opportunities are there and to help them take them up.
All right, Ambassador, we've come to the end of this segment. We'll take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Good evening, welcome back to the show. Our guest, Ambassador Andrew Jacobs, the head of the European Union delegation for Fiji and the Pacific. Ambassador, we've been talking a lot about trade and the possibilities that exist. The elephant in the room, so to speak, is the economic partnership agreement and negotiations which have been going on for a number of years. So far as we know, fisheries conservation is the hurdle to getting the EPA signed, sealed and delivered. What are the EU's hopes for EPA negotiations in the immediate future?
Well, the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, which, as you say, has been under negotiation for several years, I can't see any conclusion to the negotiations very soon. You mentioned fisheries management, fisheries conservation. It has been a stumbling block in the negotiations. I think partly because on the Pacific side there's a lot of work going on in order to try to agree among the different Pacific countries the best way forward. And for the European Union it's a very important part of the agreement, clarity on fishery stocks, conservation and management. So that has been a sticking point. But also one of the Pacific countries, Papua New Guinea, has pulled out of the negotiations of the comprehensive EPA, and the European Commission has a mandate from the European Union member states and the European Parliament to negotiate with the Pacific as a whole. So if we don't have all of the Pacific countries around the table, it's very difficult, well, it's impossible to conclude an agreement. But having said that, we're very pleased that we do have an agreement already in place. This was originally called an interim economic partnership agreement because it was designed to fill the gap before a comprehensive agreement came on stream. And that interim agreement is already in place both with Papua New Guinea and with Fiji. Fiji started working in the framework of the interim EPA last year. The interim agreement provides duty-free, quota-free access into the European Union for all products, all imports coming from Fiji and from PNG. The existing EPA provides for asymmetric and gradual opening up of PNG and Fiji markets to European products, but taking account of the economic circumstances, the different levels of development between the European Union and Fiji and PNG, and provides also for a range of different initiatives to facilitate trade by smoothing out customs procedures and so on. I mean, we think the interim EPA is a good agreement. We're pleased that it is being implemented. And other Pacific countries, in addition to PNG and Fiji, are looking at the possibility of signing up to the existing agreement because the comprehensive one is not coming on stream. I think they recognize the advantages that the agreement which is in place does present.
Just so we're clear, the interim EPA or the EPA that Fiji and PNG have signed is no different from the comprehensive agreement which is sort of stuck in limbo.
The comprehensive agreement is as its name suggests, is a more comprehensive one. But I think the main aspects which of the agreement which do provide the market access, which is so important for the Pacific countries, is there within the existing agreement, and I think it's something that we should really take note of. The EPA is there; it is being implemented, and I'm pleased that is the case.
And so, if the EU does not or cannot negotiate with the exclusion of PNG because it's pulled out, is your office in any attempts to maybe speak to the PNG government, try and get them back to the negotiating table? Because if not, this could, be stuck for perpetuity.
I don't know about discussions that are taking place with PNG, but I know that for the moment they have at least decided not to continue in the negotiations. I think they feel that the agreement that they have already, and which is also the agreement that is in place for Fiji, is a good one, and it's something on which they're happy to concentrate.
Would you recommend to other countries, other negotiating countries, to maybe sign up to the interim EPA as well, for the time being, because from what you're saying, we don't see a conclusion to the comprehensive EPA negotiations?
I think it's something that other countries are considering, and I would certainly encourage them to look at that possibility. Yes.
So far as the comprehensive EPA is concerned, all the work that's been put in over the years, all the negotiations that have been held, what would you say should be the ideal conclusion, given the circumstances that exist now?
I mean, if all partners come back to the table, if we manage to let's say overcome the differences in relation to the chapter on fisheries management and conservation, then we are more than keen to conclude negotiations for a comprehensive EPA. But at the moment, the circumstances are not there. I think we're some distance away from being able to conclude the discussions. So I think my message is clear. Let's use what we have. It's good. We have a good economic partnership agreement which is already in place, and I think that really should be the main concern, making that agreement work to the best of its potential.
From what you're saying, you're leaning more towards signing the interim EPA individually with Pacific Island countries rather than on a regional level.
It may come to that, because at the moment the comprehensive economic partnership negotiations are certainly not progressing.
Would you tonight reach out to the PNG government, invite them back to the negotiating table on behalf of the EU?
I don't want to pass any messages to one country or another. I mean, there is the agreement which is already in place for PNG and Fiji, and that I think really does need to be emphasized, that an agreement is in place, and Fiji is able to benefit from the same conditions as Papua New Guinea.
Okay, and with that, we've come to the end of another segment. Time is, of course, flying by, but we have one more segment coming up, so stay with us. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back. We're just about to wrap up for the evening, but Ambassador Jacobs is still with us, and we will continue discussions. Ambassador, 2015, the year of development, has been highlighted as a benchmark year for the EU, Fiji and the Pacific. A number of achievements that the EU has been able to complete. If you look back now, over the last 12 months or so, how is it different from previous years that the EU has existed in Fiji?
I think last year was a hugely important year, 2015. We did have the European Year for Development, which we celebrated worldwide, trying to provide more information to people on what our development cooperation is all about. And I think we took very good advantage of that in Fiji. And I was very pleased at the way in which the Fiji media and all stakeholders really were very keen to get involved in the European Year for Development, and we were passing back stories to Brussels about some of our cooperation programs in Fiji. And I remember there is one program organized by Friend, the NGO in Lautoka, providing support to a honey producer who keeps bees, and there's an excellent story which could be told about how, through the European Union support, this person was able to establish a business, and colleagues in Brussels and around Europe were made aware of this story as a very good example of the way in which European Union development cooperation can change lives and really help to ensure that people's futures are brighter than otherwise they would be. But as I say, we were very pleased with the media's response for the European Year for Development. We had a competition also during the year to based on how different media outlets were responding to the European Year for Development. And we awarded prizes to FBC, but also to Fiji TV, to Fiji Times, and also to the Fiji Sun, prizes which mean that a journalist will be able to travel to Brussels from each of these organizations sometime in June to meet our colleagues in Brussels, to see how the European Union works. And we're very much looking forward to getting that off the ground. We're starting to organize it now, and I'm sure there will be a lot to report when these journalists come back and see what the European Union is like firsthand.
So, I mean, we have this impression of the EU where we are looking up or sort of looking to the EU and its existence in the Pacific. Would this sort of visit enable people on this side of the world to sort of look at how the EU views Fiji and the Pacific?
Exactly. You know, the journalists who go to Brussels will be able to interview a wide range of different people. They will get a very clear idea of what the Pacific and Fiji means to European people. And I think it's also very important in helping people here to understand what the European Union is. You know, it's very far away. Yeah, we're about 15,000 kilometers away, our headquarters in Brussels, and yet we are an important partner for the Pacific, and the Pacific is an important partner for us. So this prize, if you like, this journalist trip will provide an opportunity, I think, for reporting on what the Pacific means to Europe and what the perceptions of Fiji and the Pacific are, both in the European Union institutions but in the public as well.
Finally, just very quickly, Ambassador, as you embark on another year, how do you propose to reach out more to average citizens? Of course, the 2015, the Year of Development, provided that opportunity, but how do you sustain it?
Well, it's a very good question. I think we've been discussing this here in our office, and I think one thing that we need to do in Fiji is do more work in the different parts of the country. For example, 9th of May is Europe Day. And we always organize a series of events here in Suva. There is an amazing race for school kids. There are various functions which are put on, and we would like to do that in other towns around the country, so people do become more aware of what the European Union is, how our partnership works, and also get an idea of the opportunities that the EU can provide in terms of higher education, in terms of support for development. I think 2015 was a real watershed in terms of our cooperation with Fiji, particularly. You know, following the return to parliamentary democracy in September 2014, we were able to reinvigorate our development cooperation with Fiji. We were also able to have our first high-level political dialogue for many years. We had a visit of our development commissioner, Mr. Mimitsa. We had here the Joint Parliamentary Assembly of the African, Caribbean and Pacific countries, which Fiji hosted extremely successfully, with around 400 members of parliament from around the world coming to Suva for a range of different meetings. And very importantly for us, we opened our new offices here in Suva, in Tapu City. These are offices from which we work with nearly the whole of the Pacific. So, as I say, a very, very important year, 2015, for our relations with Fiji, and we look forward very much to consolidating all of this during 2016.
Ambassador, with that, thank you very much for being on our show this evening. We wish you the very best of luck for 2016.
Thank you. Same to you. Thanks very much.
And that was our show for tonight. Remember, if you have any comments or questions, you can email us for the record at fpc.com.fj. Up next is Nimani Ndelambatiki with his segment My Say. From me for tonight, good evening. I'll see you next week.